Today, we're diving into the world of decision science and resilience with a guest who's worked with global leaders, he's built groundbreaking models, and he's dedicated his career to helping organizations turn chaos into clarity.
All that you need is just 2 steps. Step number 1 is have the courage to face inconsistencies.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're diving into the world of decision science and resilience with a guest who's worked with global leaders, he's built groundbreaking models, and he's dedicated his career to helping organizations turn chaos into clarity. Dr. Alan Barnard is one of the world's leading decision scientists, and he's the author of From Fragile to Anti-Fragile: How to Transform Organizations, People, and Relationships. He's the founder of Goldratt Research Labs and a pioneer in applying the theory of constraints to build systems that just don't withstand stress, but actually thrive on it. If you've ever wondered why some businesses collapse under pressure while others come out stronger, this is your episode. Alan's going to reveal the hidden mistakes that keep leaders fragile, the tools to measure your own resilience, and the blueprint for building anti-fragile companies that grow through uncertainty. Stick around because this conversation could change the way you make every decision in business and in life. Did I say that? Yes, I did. This conversation could change the way you make every decision in business and in life. Let's begin. Let's go bring them on. Hi, Alan. Welcome to the Tony D'Urso Show.
Hi, Tony. Thank you so much.
So great to have you on, and I love that South African accent. It's refreshing. And as part of that, I'm sure we're going to hear that in just a moment. We'd love to know your backstory before we get into fragile and anti-fragile. Can you tell us, Alan, how did it all start for you?
Sure. I grew up in South Africa, and we grew up on a small farm, didn't grow up with much resources. My dad was traveling. He was working in the Air Force, and I was very lucky to have a grandfather that really inspired me to read up about successful people. And he gave me this book on my 10th birthday called The Marquis Who's Who. It was in the old days of encyclopedias. It was a very thick book, and it basically contained half-page summaries, bios of the most successful people in every field. And he asked me to tell him, what am I noticing between all these people? And I said to him, what was fascinating to me was almost none of them had ideal starting conditions. You know, they all grew up in poverty. They often suffered neglect, abuse, bullying, maybe some learning difficulties. And yet, despite all of that, they succeeded. And that fascinated me. It sort of gave me hope as this little kid in South Africa. We had one person in our family that really rose up to the top. The name might be familiar to you. It was my great uncle. His name is Dr. Christian Barnard. He did the first heart transplant in the world. And that sort of set the scene to say, you know, the fact that you grow up without much resources doesn't mean that that's where you're going to end up. But I struggled at school. You know, I was always felt like the one that didn't get it. It would take me a long time to figure things out. And then I read this quote as part of that Marquis Who's Who by Henry Ford, when he said, whether you believe you can do something or can't, you are right. And that really intrigued me. I thought, you know, is it true that the universe somehow cares what we believe, or is there a much more practical implication of that? And I realized, well, if you believe you can't, you're not going to try. So that's already makes sense, right? If you believe you can't do something, you're not going to try, so you will be failed. But if you believe you can, it will give you the motivation and to try it and to learn from every experience. And that's kind of how I got into this game. I ended up setting my life goal as helping people and organizations identify and unlock their inherent potential. And I decided to focus on decision-making. And kind of a closed loop to that is that I earned my PhD when I was 40 years old. I studied industrial engineering and then did a master's in behavioral economics and behavioral psychology, and then did a PhD in innovation technology. And literally 40 years after reading that book, The Marquis Who's Who, I got a copy of the book in my mail and my name featured on it. So that was, sort of, it felt like the whole circle was closed. But that's just a brief background of my backstory. I am absolutely passionate about helping both people and organizations make better, faster decisions when it really, really matters. That's a thing that I live for every day.
A very astute and very correct observation. In my 10 years of interviewing millionaires, billionaires, people at the top of their category, whom I call elite entrepreneurs, I would say only one person maybe had their life handed to them. Every person faced adversity or tremendous problems. And the only difference between them and anybody else is these people did not give up. They kept at it. And they're all in the Marquis book somewhere along. Now, is that the spark, that book that led you to, these people, they had adversity? Is that what led you to your concept of fragility, relationships, and leadership, and how that all worked together?
The initial spark was that reading that quote, but then realizing, I just need to work hard, right? So if you do have some kind of challenge in life, you're just going to have to work a little bit harder, right? So if you're really good looking and bright, things come a little bit easier. Nothing is guaranteed. If you don't have that, you'll have to work hard. And what I realized was it would take me longer to get something, but once I get it, I really got it. And that turned into my favor at school, because I was this awkward little nerdy kid that was being bullied, until the kids realized that it took me a long time to figure something out. But once I did and I made notes, it could help them get better grades. I became very popular because my notes were so good. And I ended up, finishing school with very high marks. I went and studied industrial engineering. I graduated with the highest marks then, industrial engineering, cum laude. But it was during my final year that I read a book that really became the spark, which was The Goal by Dr. Ellie Goldratt. It became one of the 150 most read books of all time. People like Jeff Bezos claims it's one of the 3 most influential books that he ever read, and he built Amazon based on it. So I read that book, and in the foreword of the book, Goldratt had codified the scientific method in the simplest form that I'd ever seen it codified. He said, if you are passionate about any area and you want to make a breakthrough in that area, all that you need is just 2 steps. Step number 1 is have the courage to face inconsistencies. And inconsistency is simply a gap between how things are and how they could be or should be, right? So don't ignore the gap. Have the courage to face it. And then the second thing is be willing to challenge basic assumptions. So if you think about a gap, there's only really 2 assumptions. There's the assumptions on which we based our expectation. And sometimes that's the assumptions that we have to challenge. Unfortunately, most people challenge over time. If that gap becomes too big between what their dreams were, their expectations, and the reality, they start lowering their expectations, because you can't maintain that gap for very long. It causes us stress and anxiety when the gap between our expectations and reality is not just large, but maybe growing. So unfortunately, most people challenge the assumption that maybe our expectations is too low. Goldratt challenged me to say, what if it's the opposite? What if you're stuck because your expectations are too low? And that's a very interesting thing. I don't know if you've read the book, Why 10X is Easier Than 2X, that Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote. As a bestseller, became a bestseller. He wrote that book based on a question that I was asked by Joe Polish at an interview that I did with him. Joe, while he was setting up with the interview on stage with the Genius Network, he had asked the mastermind members, can you think about 3 ways to increase your net profit by 10%? And they were busy working on it. And he turned to me and he said, Dr. Barnard, what do you think about the question? I said, I think it's a terrible question. What do you mean? I said, how many ways are there to improve the profitability of your company by 10%, or if you have a non-profit, to improve the impact that you're making by 10%. Of course, there are so many ways, so it's not helpful. How many ways are there to improve your income or impact by 10x? It's very few, and maybe even one. But that helps us to focus. So that's an example of how raising your expectation helps you to see the wood from the trees. And if you are 10xing, even if you're only 20% successful, you would have still 2x'd, which is a lot better than 10% or 20%. So that meeting, or the meeting of the minds, reading the goal, seeing that process, and saying, okay, the other assumptions I can challenge, the assumptions on which my actions were based. Maybe I haven't been taking the wrong action. Maybe I've gotten distracted and I'm doing things that's not really helping me achieve my goal. So that meeting was really the reading of the book was the spark. Within a couple of months, I'd implemented that in a company that I was chief engineer of, the largest cookware company in Africa. We got dramatic results implementing theory of constraints, and we can talk a little bit later about that. But the first meeting I had with Goldratt, he said to me something that he ended up repeating to me just before he sadly passed away in 2011. And it inspires and haunts me every day. He said to me, Alan, do not dare stand in my shadow. Stand on my shoulders. I expect you to see further. So the book that you've mentioned, from fragile to anti-fragile, there's really three giants in this book on whose shoulders I stood. One was Goldratt. One was Nassim Taleb, that wrote the anti-fragile book. He also wrote Fooled by Randomness and Black Swan. And then Jack Canfield, the famous author from the Chicken Soup for Your Soul. He sold $600 million books already. So I took their work and just stood on their shoulders and took it a little bit further. So that's what's been driving me, meeting these absolute gurus that I looked up to, and finding ways to actually improve on what they've done.
That is so profound that I must tell you, in my over 3 decades of working in corporate America and 3 decades of being an entrepreneur, just the answer to that last question and the information that you gave, if anybody ponders it and really thinks it through and spends time, they cannot help but be successful. The amount of information that you gave there is absolute. It's beyond gold. I just want to say I recognize that value very much. And I'm very grateful to have that. And I'm going to go study this some more, but it's just powerful. And once again, this is Dr. Alan Barnard. We talked about thriving under pressure. We're going to talk about fragile, robust, anti-fragile, what they mean, how to use them. And you can find him at dralanbarnard.com. That's DRALAN. It's that Alan. DRALAN. BARNARD.com, dralanbarnard.com. Please check it out. This is the stuff. This is someone that's really looked at things and discovered and operated at a very high level. I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to go into a couple more things here. Alan, as I had just mentioned too, we talked a little bit, fragile, robust, anti-fragile. So can you break down these categories? I mean, we know the words, but that doesn't mean that we can, we know the words for a recipe, but doesn't mean we can go bake a really good cake or dessert or whatever. So break it down and tell us what makes them different.
Sure. So the backstory to that was I was working with Random House Publishing at the time. This is going back to about 2011. Dr. Goldratt had sadly just passed away. And I was working with Random House, so thinking about that analogy of the scientific method, the gap that they asked me to help them close was, I don't know if you know this fact, but 40% of every book that's printed by a publisher comes back for shredding. 40%.
It's huge.
So that was the expectation gap. And the question is, should they just lower the expectation because they wanted to halve that, but didn't know if it was possible. So I had come up with some hypothesis. We built digital twins of that whole supply chain so we can test various hypotheses. And it turns out that the simplest solution is actually one that works, which is just get everybody to order a little bit less more frequently. So the prevailing rule was that everybody orders 3 months of supply. And my first question is why? You can get replenished every day in the US. Why the heck would you be forcing the retailers to order 3 months at a time? Because what our simulation showed is that it meant that 50% of the books that's sitting on the shelf space and occupying cash will actually come back for shredding. So you're trying to make money from a book retailer with half the space and half the cash, which is ultimately their constraints if we follow on the etc. But I was in New York at the time when we were reviewing the results. We got extraordinary results for Random House. And I walked into the office of the CEO and he said, "I'm so sorry to hear about Dr. Goldratt passing away, but I have a gift for you." And he took out this copy of the book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. He said, "Have you read any of his other books?" And I said, "Absolutely loved, Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness." He said, "Well, then you're really going to like this one." And what I read in that book was a completely different way of looking at not just your company, but also at your life and at your relationship. Traditionally, we think that our past performance is a good indication of what will happen in the future. We're constantly extrapolating from the past, right? And what this said was that actually a much better way of judging or evaluating a system is based on how it would respond to stress. So we know that companies, people, and relationships will have both positive and negative stresses. So for a company, a positive stress would be that you end up selling more than you expected. And a negative stress is you sell less. Or a positive stress is your suppliers are more reliable than what you expected. Or negative stress is they're less reliable. And what Taleb proposed was, if you are hurt more by a negative stress than what you benefit from a positive stress, even if you had random positive and negative stresses that are equally distributed, or maybe even you had a bit more positive stresses than negative stresses, because you hurt more by a negative stress than you benefit from a positive stress, it will compound over time and your performance will start collapsing. And there's a very interesting thing about that is, imagine a business, and the question is, what will happen if 1 year you sell 20% less than expected and the next year you'll sell 20% more? Intuitively, what do you think will happen? It feels like we'll be back where we started, right?
It depends which comes first, because if you sell 20% more and then the next year you sell 20% less, you've already used the resources of the prior year. So I think part of it depends on the order, which comes first, the up or the down.
Well, the mathematics is interesting. So if I start with 100 and I sell 20% more, I'm at 120. And the next year I sell 20% less, then I'm at 96. I'm not back at 100. If I started with 100 and I sold 20% less, I'm at 80. Sold 20% more, again I'm at 96. So there's asymmetry against me. And this is a sort of a mathematical quirk, but what it shows you is that over time you will get harmed more and more and more by volatility. And that is what Taleb said is a fragile system, because it gets hurt more by a negative stress than what it benefits from an equivalent positive stress. So he asked the question, well, what's the opposite of fragile? And he said, most people answer that it's robust or resilient. So if you imagine a kind of a graph and a vertical axis, at the top is a positive impact and at the bottom of the vertical is a negative impact. And in the horizontal is a negative stress and a positive stress. So a fragile system has kind of a concave response. So it's unlimited pain on a negative stress, but limited gain on the positive stress. That's what a fragile system stress response look like. It's kind of like a inverse frown, right? It's concave.
Almost like a bell curve.
Yeah, it's almost like a bell curve, but it's basically unlimited pain. So as a small business, this is something easily to associate with. If you lost 50% of your revenue, you could go bankrupt. But if you suddenly gained 50% demand, you might only be able to capitalize up to 20%, and then you'll hit some capacity constraint. So after 20%, there's limited gain, but unlimited pain. So it makes you fragile. A robust system is kind of like a sigmoidal response. There's limited pain, but there's also limited gain. So a practical example of that would be a luxury goods company, right? Like Gucci. So when there's a downturn, do they feel it? Yes, a little bit. Do they benefit a little bit if there's a big upturn in the market? Yes, a little bit. But overall, it doesn't really hurt them. They are not harmed by volatility. Whereas with fragile systems, they are harmed by volatility. The more ups and downs there are, the more it compounds. So Taleb said, well, that's not really the opposite of fragile. What is the opposite? And he had to coin a word called anti-fragile. And he said anti-fragile is a system that has a mechanism in place that limits the pain, but it also has a mechanism in place to capitalize on gains. And a good example of that is Uber. So if you think about Uber doesn't own the vehicles, and they don't have the drivers on salary. So when there's a downturn in demand, do their margins get hurt a little bit? Yes, but it's not catastrophic. It won't cause them to go bankrupt. Whereas if they owned all the cars and they had to pay for the drivers, they might be stuck with those costs and end up losing everything. But they also have mechanism to capitalize on the gains in a very, very clever way. So when you think about demand exceeding supply, what happens with Uber is you have surge pricing. And that basically has two important roles. The first one is it allows them to maximize their margin during the period where the market can afford to pay it. And secondly, it increases capacity. Because somebody that was lying on the couch thinking that, oh, it's not worthwhile going out there driving today, suddenly they get notified to say that you are getting 3-4 times more than what you would normally on this route. They'll jump in their car and suddenly create capacity. And that's something that most organizations don't do, is they don't have a mechanism to raise prices when demand exceeds supply, and they don't have a mechanism to quickly create capacity or capability to capitalize on demand exceeding supply. So that's in broad terms what those three terms mean: fragile, robust, anti-fragile. It's essentially a completely different way of looking not just at your business, but at your life and relationships based on how you would respond to stress. So just practically, if a person is harmed more by a bad day than what they benefit from a good day, their personality is fragile. And over time, they will become depressed and maybe even suicidal. Even if they have more good days than bad days, because they are hurt so much more by a bad day than what they benefit from a good day, over time it will collapse. And the same way with the relationship. In so many marriages, they end up either in divorce or just tolerance. Why? Because they start taking each other for granted. So they don't capitalize on positive events. They feel entitled to them, take them for granted. But one negative event can kill the relationship. So I hope that was useful in terms of just applying it to all three areas.
It is, and I have multiple questions. My brain's going off in different directions.
Sure.
But the one thing you're saying, if I just stay on track, you're saying, in other words, you're saying people, the relationships, our businesses, we collectively are more fragile than we think. I think it was the answer to the second question on some of those points of focusing and confronting and facing what's going on. and being able to deal with that. But yeah, it sounds like it almost sounds, and when you think of the world today, it's like, boy, this world's more fragile than we think.
Yeah. And the book, why it resonated with me so much was I was interviewed in 2009 on one of my first podcasts. And right at the end, the interviewer said to me, I just graduated with my PhD, so I was super proud. And she said to me, Dr. Barnard, do you have any regrets? And I kind of gave her the normal polished answer I would say, I don't live my life in a way that I regret. If I fail, I try to make up for it. I apologize. I try to learn the lesson and I move on, And she was a little bit persistent. She said, come on, there must be some things that you regret. And I said, okay, I'll answer the question vulnerably. I said, I travel a lot as an entrepreneur, and you work long hours as an entrepreneur, and you just hope that one day your kids will understand, those times that you weren't there. You were working, and it's like a hard life now and an easy life later, or an easy life now and a hard life later. So I was hoping I might regret that. And I said, the second thing is that, I grew up in a very tough environment. I was bullied. But I then figured it out. And after that, it's been pretty much, green flags all along. I've had an easy life. I've become very successful very early on in my life. So kind of I'm regretting not failing more. And I think the universe went, okay, I can help with that. My wealth was fantastic at that stage. I was just graduated, 40 years old. My health was amazing. My relationship was solid. We had just 2 boys. Literally, Tony, within a year, all of those things were gone.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Catastrophe, lost a lot of clients very quickly, completely out of our control, economic crisis and the perspectives there. My relationship had grown, just as I was traveling so much, we just grew apart. We ended up starting to talk about divorce. And my health, I was traveling with the UN World Food Program all around Africa, picked up some superbug and almost died. And what I realized was I thought I was quite resilient and robust, but I realized I'd optimized my life around pretty much perfect conditions. And what's very interesting is if you think about that graph, right, that I mentioned earlier, so a fragile system has a concave response, so unlimited pain, limited gain. A robust system has a sort of an S-curve, sigmoidal curve, limited pain, limited gain. And an anti-fragile has a convex, limited pain, unlimited gain. But what's very interesting is if you watch in that intersection, all 3 of their curves look the same at very small positive and negative stresses. They get hurt a little bit by a negative stress. They benefit a little bit by a positive stress. And what I realize is the only way for you to really know if you are fragile, robust, or anti-fragile is when you get exposed to extreme positive and negatives. And that's what happened to me. And the outcome was not good. I realized I needed to re-look at my whole life and be prepared to cope with negative stresses and positive stresses rather than optimize around stability.
So can we break this down a little bit more? Like, what are the warning signs? You didn't spot them. You didn't spot what was coming when you were traveling, and all the ripple effect or the domino effect of what could happen from your actions. And I get it. You have to put you're not just putting food on the table for your family today, but you want them to have a good life. You want the home. You want bills paid. You want the lifestyle. So you have to work now for that to enjoy it later. Or so we think. We fall into that trap. But there are warning signs there that we have to realize and not brush off.
Right. So in the Anti-Fragile book, Taleb uses an interesting metaphor, a sort of group from Greek mythology of Damocles, which is you lying there on the bed, very comfortable, surrounded by beautiful women and wine. And what you miss is that there's the sword hanging over your head, right? And what Taleb proposed, which I think is very good advice for any business owner or executive out there, is to stop trying to predict events, right? To say, can this happen? What's the probability of this happening? He said it doesn't matter. What matters is just can it happen, not the probability of it happening, and what will be the impact of it happening. And kind of a good example of it is thinking about the mistake that we make when we do risk assessment is the difference between playing lottery versus Russian roulette. So if I think about the percentage failure, I'd never play lottery because I only have a 1 in a million chance of winning, right?
At best.
If I think about Russian roulette and I only look at the probability of success versus failure, I'll absolutely play it because my probability of success is 5 out of 6, right? The problem is with the impact of failure and success.
I was going to make a joke. The problem is if you have an automatic weapon.
That is yes. But let's assume you have a revolver with one bullet in the chamber, right?
Yes.
So what I realized from that is that it's like with lottery, if you win, you can win big. If you lose only a little. And that's a good way of going back to, my core passion about decision making. What makes a good decision? I realized that Taleb came out of an options trading environment. And when you're deciding which options to exercise, they have a very simple framework that allows them to make very difficult decisions in environments where there's a lot of uncertainty and lack of information. The basic question is, if this succeeds, does it have a big upside? And if it fails, does it have a small downside? If yes, that's a good option to exercise. However, if it has only a small upside if it succeeds and a big downside if it doesn't, that's a hell no decision. Don't be tempted to exercise, And there are many decisions that fall into that category where, I see companies, for example, they want to go into China and India because the markets there is massive. And you go, what is your market share locally? And I go 5%. So there's 95% of your local market available that you haven't been able to capture. What gives you the confidence that you can go into a new market and capture any percentage there, right? That's kind of should be a hell no decision because you got limited capacity. And even if you capture the tiny percent of those big markets, they can wipe out your capacity and it will compromise your service levels to your local markets. It will consume your inventory buffers. So be very, very careful. So that to me is a very useful way of thinking about how do I set myself up to become more anti-fragile, is make decisions that have a big upside if it works, small downside if it doesn't, and absolutely avoid decisions that has only a small upside if it works, big downside if it doesn't. Kind of like in a relationship, you can imagine having a one-night stand, right? Small upside if it really works. I mean, how good can it be? Big downside if it doesn't work out. And you can lose everything.
Really good points. And I'm thinking with this in terms of market share, and it really, I think, goes into how great that risk is. How much of a risk? I mean, it's a no-brainer in a Russian roulette type environment. It's a very serious risk for possibly not much of a gain. So it wouldn't make sense. Not that I'm condoning playing the lotto or anything like that. But you have to look at that. Should I go into Asia with my product, or should I go up against more competition in the U.S.? I may only have 5%, but the competition can be absolutely crazy. So there's a lot of factors, and we're not trying to necessarily take all those. But one thing I think, and you can correct me, that's part of this that's been on my mind since you first started mentioning anything at the very beginning, I wanted to bring it up, is you talked about stress as a bad stress and as a good stress. And this is something that's never really hit my brain too well, that there can be a good stress. And while I can come up with my own definitions of it, I'm thinking, is this the risk versus reward? Is this part of, well, it may be more stressful to go into Europe or Asia with my product, but it would be good. It might be better for the company. Am I thinking the right way in terms of a good and a bad stress?
Yeah, so there's formally you say, a negative stress is something that can hurt impacts a company in a negative way, like losing a customer, right? That could be a negative stress. And a positive stress would be I'm gaining a customer. But there's another way of also thinking about it, which is you can use stress as a way of testing the system, right? As being able to see what will happen if, and just thinking through that, building a model in your head or building a simulation model, but looking at how, if a stress happens, how will it impact me? And is there some way that I can actually benefit from it? There's actually a very interesting phenomena in psychology. There's a kind of a stress disorder that we all understand, right? That people that goes through traumatic experiences, post-traumatic stress disorder, they go through a divorce, they go through being laid off, etc. And it's almost like thinking about a dip, right? So I was here, I go down, and I do recover, but I never recover back to where I was. So there's a lasting impact of that negative stress on me. But then what you find out that there are other people, and they don't suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. They suffer, in inverted commas, actually they benefit from something called post-traumatic growth disorder. So they were traveling along here, very comfortable life. The stressful event happened, divorce, getting laid off, health scare, getting cancer, and their recovery overshoots, and it ends up at a higher position than before. So it's not just that you need a mechanism to capitalize on positive stresses. It's to also think about how can I benefit from negative stresses. So somebody going through a health scare like being diagnosed with cancer, often what happens is it causes them to reflect on their life and go, what the hell am I doing? Dr. Goldratt, one of the first times I met him, he asked me what my life goal was, and he gave me a beautiful definition of a life goal that I still use and teach today. He said, a life goal is just a dream taken seriously. He said, it takes courage to have dreams, even more to take them seriously. And often what happens when you have those crisis moments in your life, you get to reflect back on what was my dream? Have I gotten distracted? Am I finding myself in a rat race? And those pivot points can result in growth. It doesn't mean it will. So I sort of challenged the statement of Nietzsche that said, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. I think it should be stated, what doesn't kill you can make you stronger.
Absolutely.
Not will. There's nothing automatic about it, right? Is that you can and often do end up at a worse position than what you were, unless you're thinking about it to say, this thing has happened. We've just lost our top person. We've just lost our top customer, right? We had a recall for our product. How can I respond in an authentic way that actually benefits me from that?
I'm thinking with this, you packed in a lot, and I'm thinking with this, and I'm definitely going to listen to this again. Okay, so here we are, fragile, anti-fragile, robust. We want to build anti-fragile systems. We want to build an anti-fragile relationship. We want to have an anti-fragile life. Let's go over some of the steps. What can we do, Alan, to build that and have that? I want to say the word robust, but it's not robust. It's anti-fragile. But how do we do that?
So just 3 simple steps. And what's beautiful is it applies whether you're dealing with a company, organization, a person, or relationship. By far, the most important thing is to protect you against downside risk, big negative stresses. So it doesn't kill you or kill your business, bankrupt your business, or cause you to go into deep depression or cause the relationship to fail, whether it's a romantic or business relationship. So you need a mechanism to be able to limit the pain of big negative stresses and to think about what does that look like. The second mechanism that you need is to be able to fully capitalize on positive stresses. And the third mechanism is a mechanism that allows you to benefit from both of those, that over time allows you to get stronger and stronger and stronger, or to scale greater and greater and greater. So those are the 3 generic mechanisms that we need. And in my book, that's basically what I talk about. I have chapters for each of them to say, how do I do that for a company? How do I do it for a person? How do I do it for a relationship?
Definitely lots to unpack there. And this is a new concept to me. It's a new concept to most everyone, I think. We understand robust, we understand fragile, but the anti-fragile, definitely got to get our head around that a little bit more. And as part of that, not to throw, I hope no one minds throwing in, there's one more we spoke about fragile, robust, anti-fragile. But now we have a 4th type of system. I want to make sure that we give it a couple minutes at least. The boom bust, or AKA bipolar system.
Yeah. So the way I make sense of the world is I build models, right? And one of the simple frameworks that many of us use to build models is a 2x2 matrix, right? So what I did was I put on the vertical axis the pain side, unlimited pain, limited pain. So unlimited pain is obviously bad, limited pain is good. And then on the horizontal axis, I put gain, right? Limited gain is bad, unlimited gain is good. So I could fit in the fragile one in the bottom left-hand corner. That has unlimited pain, limited gain. So it makes me fragile. In the top left, that's where robust is. So that has limited pain, but also limited gain. And in the top right-hand corner was the ideal condition, the anti-fragile, right? Is limited pain, but unlimited gain. So it benefits more from positive stresses than what it's harmed by negative stresses. And suddenly, glaringly, there was one box open. So I wrote an email to Nassim Taleb. We had met. He had invited me to attend his training. I had invited him to present at our international conference. And I'm like, sir, with respect, you've missed one. And the one that he missed is one that has unlimited gain. So imagine a startup that can grow very, very fast, but it also has unlimited pain. It can go away overnight. So like one of the most well-known recent examples is if you think about Theranos, the company with the blood sampling, right? Elizabeth Holmes, that was the CEO, and she grew the company to 9 billion valuation. And then it turned out that they had been faking some of the science, that in fact they were using traditional ways of doing the blood test, and they never figured out quite how to do the level of blood testing on this pinprick of blood, So that to me is one that you have to be very careful of. It's often we spend so much time. So we go from fragile, we put in a mechanism to limit the pain. Then we put in mechanisms to really capitalize on the gain, and we start growing very fast. And we don't realize it, but maybe we are starting to add cost at the same rate as what we're growing revenue. So overall, it looks like our margins are improving, but it means that we're stuck with a lot of fixed cost and maybe investment, and that a short period of downside can actually kill the company. So that's the last one. I called it boom bust or bipolar, because it shows that this kind of person or company or relationship can go both ways very quickly. It's kind of like, being in a relationship with a really, really beautiful but crazy person, right? When it's good, it's fantastic. When it's really bad, it's really, really
beautiful, a really beautiful assassin.
Exactly. Yeah, you might enjoy dying. You're still dying, yeah. So I hope that's helpful. But and again, it was an example of the courage to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? I really thought about sending out that email and saying, by the way, sir, I think you forgot one. It's like, yes, I didn't think about that. It's right. There is a fourth one, and we should be very careful about that.
We should. Yeah. That kind of goes along with some things where some things are just too good to be true, and you better watch the offer that you get, because it could be a boom bust type of offer or situation. And while you're saying all this, I mean, my brain is going in so many different directions, Alan, but the one thing I'm thinking of is, we're running organizations, we're entrepreneurs, we're business people here. We want to make sure that the steps that we take today and in the future, as best as we can in the future, while the world changes so fast, if it took a year for things to really shift, that would be good, maybe 2 years. But while the world is shifting, we want to make sure we're taking and making the best decisions possible that don't make us fragile. So how can we avoid these common mistakes? I mean, we're going to read your book, we're going to go to your website and absorb more of your information and this point of view, which is brilliant. But as a takeaway, what could we do to make our better decisions?
Yeah, so from my book, I say that there's the question that changes everything. So, that night in my hotel room, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question my entire life. Most people ask, including me, how do I avoid bad things happening to me, my company, my relationship? I think that's a common thing. Is at the heart of how our minds work is survival, right? Is don't die. So trying to figure out what can go wrong and how to avoid those things. What I realized a better question is how do I build systems that get stronger when things go wrong?
I like that.
So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is asking the wrong question. And the other thing that I realized from my own life is I was optimizing around stable conditions. And I think something that COVID exposed is that, if things go well over time, you start running with very low levels of inventory, starting to outsource manufacturing to the lowest cost manufacturing positions. And then when there's suddenly a crisis and you're stuck with a lot of inventory or very long supply chains, right, that can kill you. So be very careful. A fragile system is one that has no buffer to cope with extreme stresses. An anti-fragile system not only has a buffer to cope with negative stresses, but it can use that buffer to react very quickly when there's positive stresses taking place. And I think it's the same for us true as individuals is, through my work with decision making, I've worked a number of times with people that are in part of suicide prevention centers. And what's so sad about the cases is that it's often a big surprise to the people that are closest to them. And one evening, I got a call from one of the therapists that was working, a young psychiatrist, and I thought she was having an issue with one of her, patients. And she said to me, Dr. Barnard, I'm on the verge of killing myself. And I'm, in that, it was 2:00 in the morning. In that instant, I was like, is she joking? What? And then I realized, no, she was serious. And she said to me, I know intellectually exactly what's happening to me, but I can't control my emotions. I need the pain to stop. And the only viable way of doing that is to take my own life. I can't live with the pain anymore, the trauma, the negative emotions. I'm just tired of fighting. And there's two things, I hope that none of your viewers or listeners are ever in that position. But two things that I can share if you ever are in that position. The first thing to do is you need to buy time. And the way to buy time is you ask them, who do they care most about in their life? And there's always somebody that they care about. A sister, a mother, a father. You say, I don't understand your current status. But if they were in exactly the same place that you are today, would you give them advice to take their own life? And no one will say yes. And that creates that inconsistency in the mind. Why would I give them different advice to me? And that buys you time. And then you want to understand what is going on, right? And I asked this young woman, she was about 28 years old. I said to her, please explain to me in language that you think I will understand what's going on. And she said to me, Alan, if you had a business and it had revenues of $10,000 a month, and it had costs of $20,000 a month, what would happen? And I immediately knew where she was going. I said, you're right, it will go bankrupt. I said, but how long could it survive? It depends on how much cash it's got in the bank, right? If it had $30,000 of cash in the bank, it could last another 3 months, so it buys you a bit of time. And she said to me, life energy for me is like cash. I have no energy left, no cash left. And for business, that's also true. If you have no cash in the bank, even a small reduction in revenue or small increase in cost can make you bankrupt. If you have a lot of cash, you have a lot of buffer, and that protects you against the downside, but it also allows you to fully capitalize on the upside. So that's something that we do now when we are working with suicide prevention centers. We say, I don't fully understand your situation, but is this an accurate representation? Is that you just don't have any buffer left? So two things that we're going to do. One is you need to replenish, right? So think about the things that you can do or the people that you are with that fills up your bucket of positive energy. How can you do more of that, and how can you be more with those type of people? And then think about the things and the people that suck energy from you. How can you get away from that and stop doing that? So that's like a very practical example. You first buy time with them to put themselves on a third person, and then you say, okay, the real problem is we need to fill up your buffer, because bad things happen all the time to good people. And generally speaking, if we have a lot of cash, we have a lot of energy, we can absorb those fluctuations. We're actually much more robust than what we think we are. It's a problem is when you get hit with even a small negative at the wrong time, when there's no buffer left, it can put you over the cliff. So what can you do in the time that you've got remaining? Before you declare bankruptcy, how can I increase revenues, reduce costs? That will buy me a lot more time.
That is so wise and so good. And it's great what you're doing with helping people with their troubles in relationships. Very, very commendable. That's great. Once again, this is Dr. Alan Barnard. We talked about thriving under pressure. We talked about so many things. And you can find him at dralanbarnard.com. Please get his book. Please check him out. Alan, I really thoroughly enjoyed this. Very sage, from a very different point of view than the normal conversation that I may have about marketing or HR or sales or whatnot. So really good. I just want to thank you for the advice. I'm going to go through this again, study this, pore over it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And I want to leave the audience with a little hack that I discovered. My life goal, I realize, is all about helping people make impossible decisions and achieve impossible goals. So with the second one, here's my advice. Set a goal for yourself and for your team that is so ambitious that you feel it's becoming impossible. So that's a criteria, right? 2x, 5x, 10x, whatever it takes until you say, now it's impossible. And all that you do now is you ask yourself a very simple question. It's impossible unless. And what you'll find is that that question is called a disruptive question in psychology. When we say something is impossible, it's actually a protection mechanism from having to try. So not only if we say it's impossible, we won't try, we won't even think about trying. So how do I force my mind to solve the right problem? Is I ask it, it's impossible unless, and those unless conditions, the more I can list them, and they will come up, right? Because I'm asking the right question. Every time I get a condition, by satisfying those conditions, that's what makes the impossible become possible.
And no matter what happens, you still become better off. It's impossible unless, but again, whatever growth level amount you may have, it's still better than where you are. So it's a win-win-win. Yes. Wonderful hack to think of. I just want to thank you again. It was great to have you on. Thank you so much, sir.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.
Wow, what an episode. Guys, if you like this, share this. Tell your friends. Tell all your friends. Tell every friend you know. Tell them about Dr. Alan Barnard. Tell them about Fragile, Anti-Fragile, Robust. As best as you can remember and as best as you can relay, have him check out his book and his website. Tell him what he's been through, what he's accomplished, and how different, what an incredible point of view this is. And I'm really excited by it. I'm energized by this. Very wise. And guys, wherever you're getting this, please follow the show. It helps to bring more amazing guests to you. It's totally free. So join and tell your friends, and let's help as many people as we can. All right, let's use this and let's help you move on your journey to success and become anti-fragile. Thanks, guys, and remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds. That's going to make you anti-fragile, guys. And I'll see you on the next episode.